Hey there, Podcast Aquanauts. It's your host, Casey. Okay, I gotta admit, I'm very excited about this latest episode of the show because, like many of you, probably, I had a lot of wild dreams as a kid of what I wanted to do when I grew up, from musician to marine biologist to computer programmer to astronomer. Looking back, that list of would-be roles was pretty much in lockstep with my constantly evolving interest in different subjects, the stars and planets, coding, animals, the U Symphony, and so on. Over time, a lot of those paths closed off to me when I realized that while I might enjoy the thought of doing one of those jobs, my actual skill set didn't make me especially well suited to pursuing a career in them. Nevertheless, I've always maintained my curiosity and a deep-rooted love of science. And that latter quality, one which many of us share, including many of you presumably, since you've already seen the title of this episode, is at the core of today's discussion of citizen science. As we'll soon discover, the notion of the layperson, that's non-scientist to you and me, contributing to the work of bona fide researchers is not a new one. But the many advances in telecommunications and consumer technology have made it nearly effortless for almost anyone with a curious mind and a smartphone to meaningfully participate in scientific studies through individual observation and data collection. No matter how intimidating it might seem, science isn't a walled garden reserved for those with a PhD. It's rooted in a deep-seated need, a very human one, to understand the world around us. So to the kidults out there who, like me, never outgrew their love of the natural world or their burning curiosity to know more about, well, everything, citizen science projects offer a way to satisfy both without pursuing a postgraduate degree. So enjoy this episode, a listener request special, and when you're done, be sure to email me at podcast@tnaqua.org and let me know if you participated in a citizen science project in the past or plan to after learning just how easy it is to do. All right, without further ado, on with the podcast. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Podcast Aquatic, the official podcast of the Tennessee Aquarium. I'm Casey Phillips, your host of the Podcast Aquatic, and today I thought that we should talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart as the grandson of a scientist and the coworker with a lot of scientists as well, citizen science. But before we get too deep into the weeds about citizen science, let me introduce today's special guest. This is Stephanie Soto. Stephanie, you are an educator too. Talk a little bit about your background here at the aquarium and more broadly, your background as an educator.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been here at the aquarium since 2021, came in as a community engagement educator, right after COVID, just trying to get back into the community. It was right in the title. And making those relationships that we now have and continue to fortify and make new ones. And that's what I currently do. I do a lot of the outreach, so going out into either schools or festivals and do just different projects, activities, fun things to expose people to science, or even just what is the season of fall, different things like that. So that's what we do now at the aquarium.
That's a really good point. You're actually like kind of the perfect person for this because community engagement, I mean, the whole idea of citizen science is that it is non-scientists doing science.
Basically.
Yeah. So basically it's opportunities for the lay person, so people who are amateur scientists, for lack of a better word, helping scientists.
Yeah, and I think you can also think about it as we're all scientists, just at different levels. It might not be, formal with a lab coat and, I'm on TV like Bill Nye, but we all are curious. And I think that's just the basis of being a scientist.
Yeah. I mean, look at people like Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson. Their popularity speaks to the, I think, interest that a lot of people have at a fundamental level to science, which is just understanding the world around us. Mm-hmm. So a lot of scientists work at the aquarium. In fact, several of them have been guests on past episodes of the Podcast Aquatic. But I like your characterization of this as we're all scientists, because all science is just using data to explain the things that we see and that we experience. So the topic that we're covering today is actually a request from a listener to the Podcast Aquatic.
Awesome.
So Ashley Heron asked for this. She wanted to know about citizen science opportunities in the Southeast or Tennessee in particular. And we'll get to those a little bit later, I think, in the discussion.
Okay.
But figuring out who to talk to on staff, like who was the expert for citizen science at the aquarium, was actually one of the easiest decisions I think I've ever had when it came to hosting this show, because you, the entire time you've been here, have seemed at least to be very passionate about citizen science. So can you talk a little bit about what the root of your particular interest is in citizen science and hosting citizen science programs and activities here at the aquarium.
For sure. I kind of want to go back a little bit. So I did not grow up as like a sciencey person, as one would characterize your average science person. Yeah, I loved reading books about animals, and that's where it stopped. So I think I really got into it in college when I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a marine biologist, because I had a really great high school teacher and he convinced me, and I did. I did work in the Everglades and Biscayne Bay, and I was studying seagrass and macroalgae. And yeah, it was fun. Don't get me wrong. Some of the best times of my life, especially when I got to swim with a whale shark. But how do you connect and bridge that gap? So after doing all that science, I actually got a job at a Miami-Dade County park back where in Miami, Florida. And I was a naturalist. That was my title. Which is very broad and means absolutely everything and anything under the sun, kind of like an educator at the Tennessee Aquarium, very similar. And citizen science was one of those things I was introduced to very early on. I would say probably like in 2014, 2015. And it was, let's go out for 30 minutes in this one spot. Let's see everything you can see. And I was like, okay, cool, let's do that. And all of a sudden you realize in 30 minutes, there's a lot you can see in 30 minutes. Without even moving that much. So now I have become that person that goes on a hike, but I move 10 inches in 2 hours because I'm looking at every single thing. So that's just one reason why I love citizen science. It's just, you get to discover everything in just a small area. I mean, you can also open it up to a big area, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I always tell my kids, and we've already done enough episodes of this show that I can't remember if I've shared this story or not, but when I go for hikes with my kids, we always talk about, you've got to look big, right? So you have to appreciate the vistas that you see, the mountains that are around us here in Chattanooga, the river, the trees. But at the same time, you also have to look small. So look big is important, but so is look small. And that's where you see things like the brightly colored millipede that's at your feet that you would have just stepped over or maybe stepped on if you weren't paying attention. Or the wildflowers here in the southeast in the springtime. That, I think it's very important to look at things from a broad perspective, but also to really hone in and look small to really get the whole picture.
Yeah, and it makes me happy that someone asked, for this, because it's like, yes, it's like becoming like a bigger thing.
And she has 2 kids, which makes me even more excited, because hopefully what's going to happen is that Ashley is going to share this with her kids, and then they're going to take advantage of some of the opportunities that we're going to discuss later to do something that piques their interest. Because the neat thing about citizen science, from what little bit of research I've done that hopefully will come out in the course of this conversation, is that just like science covers lots of different disciplines, there are lots of different outlets for people to be citizen science or be citizen scientists.
Oh, for sure. And I think what I like is that you can cater it to your strengths, right? So if, let's say you're a little self-conscious, you're like, oh, man, birds are hard. Birds are very difficult, by the way. So you're like, I don't want to focus on birds. Well, you can maybe focus on plants. Like maybe you're very good at picking up patterns. So you're really good at, differentiating the million species of lady beetles. But then maybe you're really good at picking up sounds. So you focus on bird sounds or different things like that. So you can kind of cater to your strengths while building up, the things that you need a little more experience in.
If we're talking about citizen science, if you were doing something like stargazing or if you were birding, is that citizen science, or does it require more intentionality than that?
So the thing with citizen science is that it does have to connect back to someone doing a project. It doesn't have to be like a formal scientist at a university. It could be someone doing their master's degree. It could be someone doing a thesis for their bachelor's that they need to apply for a grant for. Or it could be someone in high school. A lot of high schools are actually taking citizen science into their senior years and doing really big projects with that.
So to give you a little bit of backstory or history of citizen science, and we were talking about this a little bit before the show got started, that citizen science, I think, was the term, at least, I think, was first used back in the 90s. But the actual idea of citizen science, so involving amateurs in actual scientific work, dates back to the 1880s. And Wells Cook, who was an ornithologist and, very appropriately, Stephanie, he was also a teacher, began asking birding enthusiasts to send him their observations of bird arrival and departure times throughout the Mississippi Flyway, which is one of the migration routes in the United States. And these data contributed to our understanding of how birds migrated through North America. And eventually that was incorporated into the North American Bird Phenology Program. So, that makes sense. That's a bunch of non-scientists participating in a broader study than one person or even like a group of scientists could have handled all on their own.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is a lot. But it's neat because it's like it amplifies our ability to look at bigger topics, or for one person to look at a bigger topic by it's like, what do they say? Many hands make light work, which is, a turn of phrase that kind of defines what citizen science is and how it functions. Many hands make light work. But it is interesting that it all kind of started with birds, because birds, as our curator of forests, which is one of my favorite titles here at the aquarium, Kevin Calhoun often mentions that people often lament that there aren't more wild animals for them to see, or that they don't see as many wild animals as they wish they could, completely neglecting the fact that the most common vertebrate that most of us experience every single day of our lives is birds.
Yeah.
They're so common, they just kind of disappear into the background until you start to pay attention to them as part of maybe a citizen science program.
Yeah. Literally, if there's anything citizen science gives you, is time. It really just gives you a moment of, wait a minute, there's a lot going on around here. And it helps you, I think, to it's just a mental health break of, I'm gonna just focus on the nature around me, even though I am literally in downtown Chattanooga at the IMAX theater. Yeah. There is a plenty in this little garden. I have so many observations of the coolest flies, and all the cicadas came here, all the different species. It's good times.
Stephanie is pointing behind her at the IMAX garden here at the IMAX 3D Theater at the aquarium. So just across the street from the aquarium proper, so our River Journey and Ocean Journey buildings, there is the IMAX 3D Theater. And if you're waiting for your showing, do come into our relaxing garden. I'm not sure what the name for it is. It's just IMAX garden, I guess.
I think so.
This is called the Garden View Conference Room, so that's very appropriately named. But yeah, you mentioned paying attention and a mental health break. So what is at the root of your particular interest in citizen science? Like, what do you like about it? Is it just the fact that it is a chance to sort of slow down and pay attention to the things around you, or is there more to it than that?
So I think it has transformed over time. I think when I first started, I'm a millennial. So like Pokemon, got to catch them all. I got to see them all, okay? And I need to have the proof of it. So it's kind of where it started. I'm not going to lie. I just wanted to see everything I could in this one place. And then it slowly, don't get me wrong, that's still there. Because I get so excited when I get a new species. I'm like, another. Don't ask me what the count is. I don't know.
Okay, so Stephanie just brought up Pokemon here, and the more I think about it, the more appalled I am that I didn't connect this legendary video game franchise with citizen science while we were actually chatting. If you've never played any of the dozens of mainline and spin-off titles in the almost 30-year Pokemon series, a sentence that makes me feel absolutely ancient, let me break it down. The premise of each game is that players are exploring an expansive landscape, observing, capturing, and battling the creatures that they encounter. Why are they doing this? Well, at the beginning of each game, or at least all the ones I've played, they meet a professor who asks for their assistance with a scientific study to comprehensively document that region's unique biodiversity as part of a species database known as a Pokédex. So, to recap, we've got someone conducting amateur biological field research on the part of an academic who incorporates the data that they collect into a larger scale project. So yeah, Pokemon is, somehow, the most wildly popular example of citizen science in all of pop culture. That's mind-blowing. Anyway, with that nerdy rant over, let's get back to the podcast.
I think it has changed now just with getting older, but just kind of taking it slower and taking it easy. And citizen science, or really just going out into nature, taking that moment, is so nice. It gives you a second to realize that there's so much happening around you all the time. You don't have to go into the middle of the forest to see things. Funny enough, you can be in downtown. But I also took a bird language class this past semester in the spring where we had to do bird sits every week. And IMAX Garden, funny enough, was my place that I chose.
Bird sit?
Yes. So basically learning bird language, not necessarily the calls, but what the calls mean. So are you singing versus are you like calling the other bird? Like, hey, I'm here. Okay, cool. Just wanted to let you know. Or are you alarming? Like, there is a hawk on your 12. Gotta go. You know, like what's happening? And I did it right here in this garden. And every week there was, funny enough, a mockingbird that slowly got used to me and got to a point where, if you know anything about mockingbirds, I'm sorry, but they're not the nicest.
They will dive bomb you in a hurry.
Exactly. This mockingbird became my friend. It was kind of crazy. A whole spring semester, and at the end, just sitting maybe 4 feet away from me. When I first started, it was screaming. It was honestly kind of like your sketch. And I'm like, I know. And so are you, man. Like, come on. But having those moments and just, I built a relationship with that bird, even if it was for a little bit. And I don't know, hopefully change his mind about people. But
it's the state bird of Tennessee too. If you are not caught up on your state symbols, the mockingbird is the state bird of Tennessee
and Florida.
Mm-hmm. I did not know that.
I think it's quite a few states.
Well, don't take it. Don't take the
Sorry,
specialness
Tennessee.
away from me. Okay. So talk about citizen science opportunities that you have created or overseen here at the aquarium in your role as an educator. What are the kinds of activities that you've done that would be considered citizen science?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that I try to do, just because it's local, is the City Nature Challenge. So that's like a big one to gear up for year round. It happens every year in April. This year it's happening, I think it starts April 25th.
So 2025, you mean?
Yeah, 2025. And that's one that I try to get people kind of going with, just because it takes time to get there, and spring is a very busy time. And just getting people used to how to make observations. Because, okay, I saw a bird. I know it's a northern mockingbird because maybe I just really know that bird. But now what proof of that bird do you now have, right? You can't just post a comment.
Well, before we get too into this,
sure.
What is the City Nature Challenge? Let's explain that for people who maybe are unfamiliar with it.
Yeah, so the City Nature Challenge, it's pretty cool. It's a yearly event competition worldwide. I mean, a bunch of countries participate. Bolivia's won the last 3 years. La Paz, Bolivia.
Wow.
And so it is just the world participating in this global BioBlitz, which is just a fancy way of saying you have a small amount of time to go see things, plant or animal, and document them. And so that happens every year in April. And then you also have time to identify those things. So it's not just posting up the pictures and the sounds. It's now, who are they? And everyone around the world participates and helps different cities. So we have the Greater Chattanooga Project that comes up every year on iNaturalist for the City Nature Challenge. And so, man, I think it's like 13 counties that can participate. Wow. And so I try to get people excited for that when we go to festivals or schools. A lot of schools do BioBlitzes now. So I'll be like, hey, do you want to participate in April? Because your school's in the area. Mm-hmm. So trying to help with that and do trainings throughout the year.
Okay. So that's one example, the City Nature Challenge. Mm-hmm. What else?
Other things that they're not fully established yet, but there is a school that we work with. They're a little further down in Dalton, Georgia.
Is this Park Creek?
Yeah, it's Park Creek.
Park Creek Elementary. We've done a lot of work with them.
Yeah. We do a lot of cool stuff.
We should give them shout outs. I mean,
we should.
They deserve a shout out.
But they have a few acres right on their school grounds. And they had started a little iNaturalist project. Just, hey, this is the Park Creek area. Post things when you see them.
We'll talk more about iNaturalist later.
Yeah, we will. And it became kind of a census. But now what we're going to try to start doing with the classes is see if each grade level can maybe document a different type of life. So whether it's plant, fungi, specific animal, that's kind of what we're going to work towards, just to learn what a plant is, what is a bird? What is a mammal? It's easy to say those things, but we kind of forget we don't start with that knowledge. Hence why people come to the aquarium and go, are penguins mammals? Let's take it back.
Or are penguins birds? Some people say, someone told me that a penguin's a bird. I don't believe them.
Right? Take a
see?
second. It's like, you know what? To be fair, when's the last, is this your first time seeing a penguin?
That's true.
A lot of times.
If you see something that has what look like flippers and doesn't fly, you'd be hard pressed to think that's a bird.
Yeah, especially with sometimes in school, they're like, all birds fly. And it's like, well, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of a project that we're working on right now.
So, Stephanie, how do you see citizen science and supporting and promoting that kind of activity in the community? How do you see that as supporting the aquarium's mission to connect people with nature and empower them to make informed decisions about water and wildlife?
I mean, how is someone going to connect with something when they don't know what it is? I think it's just the basis of it. Like, we want people to make informed decisions. Well, what is even in the water that's behind your backyard or at the park you really like to go to and be on the swings at? Like, if you don't know what's in it or what it is, it's kind of hard to connect with it. So this is just a really easy way to do it, and just to learn the basis of, like I said, what is a spider? What is an ant? Like, just those little things that have these nuances that you didn't think of before, because why would you? It's not something that you focus on.
Yeah, it's funny how many times we're out in the field with the scientists from the Tennessee Aquarium Conservation Institute, and a lot of the work that we do takes place on private land. Mm-hmm. So having interactions with landowners is very important. Having a good relationship with them and getting permission to do something like sampling a creek that flows through somebody's backyard. You mentioned backyards. Literally, a lot of our work does actually take place in people's backyards or their pastures or whatever. And it's funny how many times people will say, and even will let us come in because we'll say, well, you know that this endangered fish is found only in this creek, so there's a good chance that it's in your backyard. They'll have no idea, zero idea. And suddenly the fact that they know that they share this land with this endangered species, suddenly they feel like this sense of connection to it. So I think you're right. I think it's a very important thing for people to feel that sense of connection. And if they don't know that animal's there, they're not going to feel that connection.
Exactly.
So we've taken a long time to get here to this point, but the whole reason why Ashley reached out to us and asked us to do this episode was to talk about specific opportunities for people to do citizen science. And she was asking for things in this area, so in Tennessee or maybe in the Southeast more broadly. So what are some kinds of things that people can do who would like to be citizen science in this part of the country?
For sure. It's kind of broad. So you can have kind of your general citizen science that there's just a platform in which you upload images and sounds, and an expert sees that on the other end and helps you identify it. And that's iNaturalist, the website or the app. And then the Seek app, which is privacy, like for people that like privacy, don't want an open forum for people to talk to them. That's an option. A lot of people call it like the child-friendly version of iNaturalist, because like I said, it's not an open forum, so nobody can talk to you. But a lot of plant people love Seek.
I'll make sure that I include URLs to all of the sites and tools that we talk about in the show notes if you want to find any of these tools that we talk about.
Yeah, for sure. So that's more of like a general, I want to take today, I'm off on Saturday and it's a beautiful morning. I'm going to go out from 9 to 11 and I just want to take pictures and collect audio recordings. And that's kind of a general citizen science. And it may fall into someone's project. That is always a possibility. There are millions of projects on iNaturalist. If you click the projects tab, wow, you can be on that for days.
So like your observations could ultimately benefit a project that's ongoing that is looking for examples of, say, a specific species appearing somewhere? Or
yeah, I think there's some that are like very broad, that it's like, I think there's like a Birds of North America. There's one that I love that's like skulls and bones. So it's like what's left behind. So scat and tracks is also one. So, poop footprints, that's always fun. So there's a lot of I mean, there's so many projects. I don't even know.
So basically, you can be a
count it.
citizen scientist just by going out and doing maybe something that you would enjoy doing anyway. And by documenting it and putting it up on this database, you are ultimately contributing to a scientific project kind of passively, not even having to actively do it. You're just kind of doing it. And
literally passively.
And your data ultimately benefits a scientist, and they say, thank you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have ended up on projects that I was like, wait, this exists? And there was like a website, I think it's called like Edges of Life or something. And they sent me the link and they're like, hey, your post is on here. And I'm like, cool. And it's this project documenting the southernmost and the northernmost point of specific trees to show how climate change is shifting their range.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm on there for like 3 trees or something.
What,
and I'm like,
do you remember what trees?
No, I don't. Not even a little bit. But it's the most random, like, oh, cool. I'm glad I got that for you, man. Like, I'm so excited. So it's fun. You sometimes, like you said, it's passive, which is maybe takes the stress away from some people.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to, you're kind of stressed out, like, it's a project.
Like the pressure,
it's okay.
The pressure's off.
Yeah, the pressure's off. And then you find cool projects and maybe do get invested specifically in those projects and work hard on them.
So it's kind of like you can be as invested as you want to be.
Yeah.
Okay, so you said that was Seek and
iNaturalist.
iNaturalist. Okay.
I would say that. As well as eBird. I feel like eBird is another one. That's an app as well and a website. And that one is audio recordings of birds.
Okay.
Yeah, and that you're just collecting.
Collecting how? Can you just do it with your phone, or do you have to have like a dedicated microphone like we're talking into right now?
I just do it with my phone. Yeah.
And that'll be enough for someone to identify it?
Yeah. And it does have like, it has like an AI that helps with it. But there are curators on the other end that verify those because they're not always correct.
Okay.
But that's another one. And that one is very hands off, at least the way I've seen it. I don't use it as much as I do iNaturalist. So that one's pretty passive too. There's also another one. If you're really into bugs, it's more, again, of an informal forum, but it is called bugguide.net.
Okay. How do you spell that?
Bugguide.net.
Oh, Bug Guide.
Yeah.
Okay, so is it BUGGUIDE?
Yes.
Okay, again, we're going to put all this in the show notes, but just for people who are too lazy to check the show notes.
Yeah, and it's all about bugs, plus arachnids. So it's everyone. But it's cool because you go up, you can post your things, and everyone is just helping each other identify these bugs because bugs are very difficult to identify. There are so many. So that's a fun website to go to and just collect photographs, learn to ID them yourself, and also talk to people who are experts. There are some people out there that are experts in, a certain genus of beetle. So that means, very, very specific organism. So it's pretty cool.
I mean, there are people who make their entire career studying just a single genus of beetle.
A single species.
Yeah.
Which I think is crazy. Which is crazy in a good way. Another one that's local that happens once a year. I did mention the City Nature Challenge earlier. But also now coming up is the Christmas bird count. Sorry.
Yes, so let's talk about the Christmas bird count. We're recording this episode. It would normally come out more like February based on the production schedule that I've been kind of sticking to. But as you pointed out, the Christmas bird count is coming up. And even if you're not like boned up on citizen science, if this is like one of the first times you're hearing about citizen science, you may actually have heard of the Christmas bird count and not realize that it is an example of citizen science.
Yeah. Because
this is actually the 125th Christmas bird count.
I was going to say, yeah, it's for sure over 120.
Yeah, the Audubon. This is the Audubon Christmas bird count. Mm-hmm. So it started back in whatever that would be, 1889. No, 1899. 1899. So just before the turn of the previous century. People who want to make me feel old say that I was born in the century.
1900s. Yeah,
which is true.
I love hearing that.
This actually started in the 1800s, just barely. It scraped by about a few weeks. Okay, so digging a little more into this online, the first Audubon Christmas bird count started in 1899, but the oldest count for which the National Audubon Society has records took place on Christmas Day, December 25th, 1900. The following year, the ornithological journal BirdLore published findings for the count, which was then called the Christmas Bird Census. Online, it's easy enough to look back at digital records that show what people were finding back in the day. In 1901, for instance, it was big news for the readers of BirdLore to find that A.A. Saunders documented sightings of 2 white-breasted nuthatches and a lone brown creeper at Edgewood Park in New Haven, Connecticut, or that Edward Kimball spied a downy woodpecker, 26 American crows, and 10 chickadees in New Rochelle, New York. Given that the Christmas bird count now attracts tens of thousands of observers every year, it's fascinating to look back at its comparatively modest beginnings when the entire census findings could fill only a dozen pages or less. With that long-winded aside out of the way, back to the podcast.
I think it's cool because it started as an alternative to hunting, because there was like a Christmas tradition where you go out and you hunt the prettiest or the biggest bird or mammal. And then it was like, oh, how about we do something maybe a little different, a little more sustainable, a little more conservation focused.
It's like, yeah, I wonder where all those passenger pigeons went.
Yeah.
I'm being flip. But yeah, the Christmas bird count is one of the largest that happens every year. It starts on December 14th, which is when this releases, it'll be Saturday.
Okay.
Is when it starts, and it goes through January 5th. And what do you do during the Christmas bird count?
The Christmas bird count is a little more formal when it comes to a project. So it is important that you go on the website for the Christmas bird count on Audubon, and you basically have to register in your area. So there's like a head person for like a 15-mile radius. And of course, who is our person for Chattanooga? Kevin Calhoun.
Previously mentioned earlier in this discussion, the curator
Yes.
forest for the aquarium.
Yes. Number one birder of Chattanooga.
He is definitely a bird nerd, and I will convince Kevin to come on to a bird-specific podcast at some point in the future.
That'd be fun. And he can argue why penguins are birds.
He will, yeah. Well, Kevin will argue about many things. Kevin is very necessarily particular when it comes to birds, but he's also very passionate in a fun way about birds. So
Basically, yeah, so he's our person. There's a person designated to each research area. And so on this website, you register with that person. And I will say it is limited to how many people can participate, because there's only so many people that can participate within an area, because he has to make sure everyone is okay and know how to go about kind of what they're doing that day.
Properly document what they see.
Exactly. And usually if you are brand new to birding, they usually pair you up with someone local that's an expert. You're kind of paired. So usually you have to meet up somewhere in a designated location to participate in the Christmas bird count.
So Stephanie, when you get to the location where the bird count is happening, what exactly do you do?
Oh, perfect. Yes. So basically you document everything that you either hear and or see that day in that location. And all of that is really designated by the person in charge. The compiler is what it's called. So
they're
that
kind of
would
like
be
there to verify. Is that fair?
I think that happens after the verification of everything, based on pictures and sounds.
But they're there to be like, no, that's a car horn, not a bird.
They can be, if whatever expert's with you. But in general, the compiler is kind of making sure everybody knows where to go, because we don't want too many people in one location. Let's say within this circle, we don't want everybody in the upper part of the circle and no one down. So they just make sure to spread everybody out as much as they can to hear as much as they can on that one day that is chosen.
So why is the Christmas bird count important? Like what we talked about these projects, or all citizen science tying into a project. So what is the project that this is supporting?
So a lot of projects have been published through the data that has been compiled over the last 100-something years. A lot of it, I think, is migration patterns. So like, who's here that maybe shouldn't be or hasn't been in the past, and why? And it brings up more questions than answers, but in a good way, of like, oh, okay, this now needs to be studied more. This now needs to be researched more. So I think a lot of things have to do with migration, and also just how climate change is affecting what birds are here, or maybe, at least down south when I was in Florida, a big one was, ooh, we have a hurricane. What birds from the Bahamas came up? Like different things like that. You can study that and see the patterns that happen. And, is there something that can be prevented? Is there something that we can just be aware of and be prepared for? So I think it's a lot.
So again, like you said, when you were talking, I think about iNaturalist. So you're collecting data, and that data isn't necessarily for one end use. It could be used by anybody who needs that particular data or data about a specific species. It doesn't matter that it's even if you didn't collect it for that one project, it could be used for that project if that person has need of that specific information.
Yeah. The Christmas bird count that day, the aim is who is here that day. And that is all of that. But then from there, that data can go anywhere, which I think is cool.
And you don't even have, so you mentioned going to a specific spot. When I looked this up earlier, you can actually take part in the Christmas bird count at your house by looking at your feeder.
Yeah, I think as long as it's in the correct area, again, that's just something that you confirm with your compiler, like the person in charge of your area.
Yeah, so you might not even have to like leave your living room and just like sit on your couch looking out your window at your bird feeders and
Very true.
Seeing what species happen to show up on that day within the parameters that were given to you by the person organizing that particular location. Mm-hmm. We talked about the Christmas bird count and how big that is. So it is big. It is not actually the largest citizen science program in the world. Do you know what it is?
No.
Okay. Well, you've actually mentioned it already.
Oh.
The Audubon Christmas bird count attracted more than 79,000 counters, which includes field observers and feeder watchers, which is what we were talking about just a second ago.
Cool.
Last year. But the largest is actually the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's eBird.
Yeah.
So that's an internet-based community project that you mentioned earlier as being one of the ones that people should maybe consider taking part in. And that passed 1.1 billion user-reported bird observations, and that was in May of 2021.
Wow.
So you figure 4 additional years of reporting on top of that, significantly more than 1 billion observations. That's a lot.
It's a lot of birds.
A lot of birds. It's a lot of birds. A lot of species. A lot of different, not directories, but a lot of different databases on there. That's one that I really need to like look into because I'd heard of iNaturalist prior to, largely because of I guess your involvement in our push for people to be involved in the City Nature Challenge. I was familiar with iNaturalist. I had never heard of eBird prior to this.
Oh, funny. It's usually the other way around, I feel.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I guess it makes sense knowing that now that eBird is larger, but I'd heard of iNaturalist kind of because of you and a couple other people on staff who really stand for it.
Yeah, I love it. I'm obsessed. So.
Yeah, what is, you mentioned that you kind of like to slow down and look at a lot of different species. Is there a particular taxonomic group that you happen to really be passionate about? We've talked a lot about birds. Is that because birding just happens to be one of the things that there are a lot of citizen science projects that are related to birds, or are you actually very passionate about birds?
I think there's a lot of citizen science projects that revolve around birds because they're everywhere all at once. I think they're just very easy for someone to get into because they're accessible, whether it's visual or auditory, which I think is cool. Personally, birds, we have a funny history. As a naturalist, there was a lot of birders in my, in our staff. So that was one thing that I was like, I don't got to do birds because we're good. We got professionals here. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm not a fan of birds. Now, look at me. I took a bird language class.
That's true.
Yeah, birds are my thing now. Are they my number one taxonomic group? Absolutely not. But I appreciate them.
You also seem, based on past conversations that you and I have had, is it fair to say that you're kind of a big fan of insects?
Yeah, I like them a lot. They're a lot of fun.
You've spoken out in support of moths before, as sort of under-celebrated. I think you kind of you talk about people always like kind of look at butterflies as like the pollinators, like the best pollinators.
Yeah, or like what do people say about moths? They call them night butterflies when butterflies are day moths because moths came first. Okay, first of all, and number 2, moths. I mean. Yeah, I feel like anything at night is under-celebrated because most of the time you don't want to go out at night because what's going to pop out behind the tree? Like you're afraid of what you don't know. And then they have, cute little fuzzy faces that sometimes get a little too close to you and they make you nervous. I get it. Every now and again, I get a little too close to bugs and I'm like, oop, I've reached my quota for the day. I'm going to back up. But other days, I'm faced in with a longhorn beetle. I don't know. It happens. But yeah, I think it depends on what I see. So I just go down rabbit holes. You know how it is.
Yeah.
I see something. I'm like, wow, I've never seen you before. Then I just do a deep dive into everything. And I'm like, wow, it has this many observations on iNaturalist. This is its range. This is where it used to be. And it goes nuts from there.
So what's your favorite rabbit hole that you've gone down directly as a result of participation in a citizen science project?
Whoa. I do have a few observations from iNaturalist that I think I went down a rabbit hole. It was back when I was a naturalist at the park, and my boss was like, hey, look at this weird photo I took. And I'm like, what is that? It was the weirdest photo. I have it up. I'm literally looking at it right now. And I'm like, I have never seen this spider before. Who are you? And posted it on iNaturalist, and I went through spider blogs. There was a Facebook group for specifically like Florida and Caribbean species. And for a week, I was just looking up spiders.
This is making the arachnophobe in me just want to shrivel up and die, but continue, please.
Literally, this was Steph in what, 2016? Steph from 2013 would have been like, you were looking up what? You should be looking at seagrass, not spiders. But I did this whole deep dive, and finally, I think I found it. I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is a Dominican spider. Like, that's the name of the spider. But we're like not in DR right now. So am I right? Posted on iNaturalist. I put Dominican spider, and I'm like, I think this is what it is and why. And the comments that came from it, which again took me down another rabbit hole, was basically a few years ago, somebody was like, hey, I tagged so-and-so because there's experts on the website. And it looks like this iNat observation was the first one in North America in 2016. And now the Dominican spider in the early 2020s is just established in South Florida. So it's one of those that it's like, oh, this rabbit hole I went down for a week, the reason it took me so long is because, hey, little buddy, you're not supposed to be here. But it is now. So
citizen scientist Stephanie Soto kind of paved the way for us to learn something about a species that hadn't been here before.
Yeah, and sometimes it just happens by accident, because my boss literally went for a walk and was like, what is this, Steph? And I'm like, I have no idea. Wow. That's literally it.
But that's so cool, because that literally contributed to our understanding of a species distribution. And you weren't setting out to do that.
No.
You just got sucked down a rabbit hole.
Literally. But
that's citizen science. Like that is an example of it in action.
Yeah. And I could take breaks whenever I wanted. I didn't have to continue that rabbit hole. It's just me.
Okay, Stephanie, let's wrap up this discussion by talking a little bit about how people can get into citizen science.
Okay.
So if you want to do some of the things that we've talked about in the course of today's episode, what are some things you can consider or should consider adding to your toolkit, whether that's actual physical equipment or maybe apps that people should just have on their phones? Maybe their phone is the equipment. I don't know.
Yeah.
What should people consider having with them to take part in citizen science, whatever that happens to be?
For sure. So I think if you're going to go the photo route, so you're going to focus on observations, a phone is going to be, I guess, the base of what you need to have. Androids come with really great cameras now. I mean, I feel like Androids are kind of the basis of iNaturalist at this point. They have the better app compared to iPhone, funny enough. So have the phone.
I'll try not to be offended as an iPhone user.
Sorry. Just saying. Android, and iPhones have them too, but they have a macro lens, right? So you have to get a little closer to whatever you're taking a photo of. If you do not have a macro feature on your phone, it's kind of like a headband for a phone that helps.
Like a clip-on lens.
Yeah. Or this one's like a rubber band. Literally.
Yeah,
like a headband.
or a strap-on lens.
Yeah. And that helps you get closer images, because if you're looking at bugs, right? Or you're looking at the smallest details of a gall on a leaf, like you need to be able to get a good photo. Or let's say you do get a photo, a description a very in-depth description is lovely. Please describe as much as you can.
Like a written description.
Written description.
Okay.
Yes, that's always great.
And you can take those notes, I guess, on your phone, on your notes app.
Yeah, you can do that too. Or when you upload it too, it has a notes section. So I think in terms of equipment, that's the basis. If you want to get fancy and, have a Canon and Nikon, of course, I have one too. But sometimes you're not in that moment. Sometimes you don't have that camera. Well, you see something cool.
The quote that every photographer has probably heard a billion times is the best camera is the one that's with you.
Yeah.
Okay, so
it'd be like that.
So physical equipment, a phone will do you in most circumstances then.
I think so. I think if, again, when things are far away or they move very quickly.
Birds.
Yeah, birds. Binoculars, of course, are going to come in handy. You can take a video while you're looking through the binoculars. I've done it with a microscope. It takes a little bit, but you can do it. And so when in doubt, take a video and then screenshot. And then, of course, you can have your own audio recorder, but what's on your phone should work just fine. I think what I like about it is that it's so accessible. I think just it depends now how, I don't want to say serious, but how in depth you're trying to get with your observations is when now you start getting the fancy equipment, the better cameras with the different magnification lenses. If you want to look at things that are in the water, you need a microscope, which those are super important. The plankton that's in the water, the algae, all of that counts, right? They're there, and they need to be observed and counted. So,
well, and there are some examples of citizen science programs I found that you can take part in, and we were talking about this before the episode started, that we would try not to overlap too much on each other's lists. So you can fill in the blanks where my list maybe doesn't cover everything that you would cover. But NASA has a lot of different opportunities for citizen science. If you go to science.nasa.gov/citizen-science, you can do all kinds of things. You can do cloud spotting on Mars. You can help decode signals from gamma ray bursts, which sounds like something that you would do in a comic book. You can help look for exoplanets beyond the orbit of Neptune. Those are all really cool things. And with a lot of those, you are just looking at imagery that's coming from NASA's equipment. So the James Webb Space Telescope or Hubble, you're helping to comb through those images, helping scientists look for specific things. And all the details about those programs are on that site, which again is science.nasa.gov/citizen-science. The U.S. General Services Administration has a site called citizenscience.gov. And that has a toolkit for planning a citizen science project if you want to start one of your own, or it has a huge database of ongoing projects. You can document frog and toad calls for the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. That's the accrediting body the body that we are accredited through here at the Tennessee Aquarium. That's Frogwatch USA. You can report on monarch butterfly sightings to the University of Kansas each fall as part of Monarch Watch. And the National Weather Service has a program called Skywarn that lets you report on severe and hazardous weather to help meteorologists and emergency managers make, important decisions about, warning the public when it comes to things like tornadoes and massive thunderstorms, microbursts, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So a lot of different ways to engage in citizen science that some of which have nothing to do with animals at all. We've talked a lot about animals because I think that's your particular passion.
Yeah.
But
sure.
You can do water quality testing, all kinds of things.
Yeah. And a big thing that I feel like comes up in the news every few months is a 17-year-old kid discovered a new planet. NASA couldn't. Most of those, I'm pretty sure, are all citizen science related because you have a person who hasn't been on this project for a decade, brand new eyes, look at the same image you've been looking at, and they're going to see something you don't. And that's what's so cool about citizen science. You get everybody's skills all in one place, and they don't have to be an expert. That's the point, right? We're supposed to work together. I have a website, too, called Zooniverse. So Z-O-O, Zoo, Niverse, like universe. And it has projects in everything. So climate, history, medicine, nature, the arts. And it's people that put up their projects. They teach you how to do it. There's usually a little just thing that you go through to learn what they need. And you go through it, and it's pretty cool.
Go forth in science.
Yeah, go forth in science. Go forth and be great.
All right, Stephanie, unless you have anything else to add, I think we can go ahead and wrap up today's episode.
I was gonna say one thing.
Okay.
Just because I'm sorry, iNaturalist is not sponsoring me. I swear. I really like it. But you mentioned projects that you want to do as a person. So like, let's say you start down this route and you love it. You're like, I want to do a project. I'm curious about mockingbirds in downtown. To just go back to the mockingbird. On iNaturalist, you can make your own project. You don't have to be working at a university. You don't have to be working at the aquarium. You can make your own project. You can make borders on a map, which is a fun skill to learn. I learned it real quick on YouTube. It was great. And you can set your own parameters. Maybe you're looking at mockingbirds within a certain area. You can set all of that and it becomes your own project. But it's cool what you can do with it. You can be your own project person. There's one that I do here in Chattanooga. The project is like Southeast Flora and Fauna, so plants and animals, just to see what is specifically in Southeast Chattanooga. So it's cool. It's whatever you want to do.
Whatever you want to learn more about.
Yeah.
Well, Stephanie, I think with that,
Yeah.
we can go ahead and wrap up today's episode. But thank you so much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to come and share your passion for citizen science with the members of the Podcast Aquanaut Corps.
Heck yeah.
We certainly appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for the invite.
If you have any ideas for a future episode, if like Ashley, you would like to request a topic for us to cover in a future episode, please send that to us by email at podcast@tnaqua.org. You can also, on whatever platform you happen to be checking out the podcast on, leave us a review or a rating. Those are all very helpful when it comes to giving us favorable play with the algorithm. The algorithm gods are difficult to please, but they do enjoy ratings and reviews, so please do leave one of those if you can. Until next time, remember that every drop matters.